Claudia Chender is leader of the NDP here in Nova Scotia. Claudia Chender, thanks for doing this today. We always appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
All right, I want to talk to you about the release that you sent out this week about the grocery tax. But if you don't mind, I would like to kind of get your take on what's happening with these school support workers and this ongoing a strike. Just kind of broad strokes thoughts do you have on this?
Yeah, well, listen, thanks for asking. I actually just came from the picket line in Spryfield, and it was, in a word, just heartbreaking. I mean, tears all around. Tears from the education professionals, the EPAs and the ECEs who just want to be in the classroom but can't really afford to feed their families on the wages they're being offered, and tears from the number of kids on that picket line who can't be in school, and so they're coming to see the people they rely on where they are, and their parents are coming out in support. So, I mean, in a nutshell, the government has to get back to the table, because not only are thousands of kids being denied an education, which, I mean, that's real. Like, people need to really think about that. But the other piece of it is that in this labor market, we're going to lose these professionals. The ECEs, I talked to a woman today who said she had 3 other job offers from previous employers, the child workers, the support workers. Like, these folks can get other jobs in their fields that in many cases will pay the same or better tomorrow. So I think the government's playing a real dangerous game. And in the end, our kids are the ones who are losing.
Replacement workers are being used, though, from what I've read. Is that the case?
Yeah, there's replacement workers coming in place of some of the EPAs. The last I heard, they had been trying to hire 400 and they had gotten 20. But, you know, these aren't the workers who know the children.
Right.
They don't have familiarity with the school. They don't have familiarity with the specific needs of the kids. And like the workers they're replacing, they're getting paid a wage that they cannot possibly live on. And so, you know, obviously we think that this is not the solution. We understand the plight of families and kids with special needs, many of whom need to be in school. They need those routines, but this is not the way to do that. The way to do that is for the government to go back to the bargaining table today and find a way to make these workers whole, to make sure they can feel respected, that they can feed their families, because right now they feel ignored. And, you know, it's if you know anybody who has a kid in pre-primary or a child, you know, who needs support in the classroom, it's a devastating situation for the families who are affected. And ultimately, it's going to be a terrible and lasting situation for the regional center if they don't come to a resolution soon.
Yeah, they need a huge increase, obviously, when you look at what they're getting paid. But I think they would be realistic and all that goes with that. But we don't know what the demands are, though. They've kept that tight to the chest. So that's kind of where we're at, right?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. Obviously, it's tricky because some of the locals have ratified this outside of HRM and some haven't. But of course, as you and I have talked about in the past, the cost of living in HRM across the province, but in HRM somewhat disproportionately, I would say, have skyrocketed. And so, you know, when I talk to these folks, what they want, number one, what they want is respect.
Right.
They want to be acknowledged for the work that they do, which is really hard work. But they also, like I say, they want to be able to feed their families. Many of the mostly women in these jobs are parents. And many of them are single parents or parents of kids who have special needs themselves. And that's why they take these jobs, because they can work when school is in and they can be out when school is done. But, you know, it's a long pattern of the government expecting women to work for less. Particularly in, you know, what we might call the caring professions, because they'll do it out of the goodness of their heart. And frankly, you know, we don't have the luxury of making that choice anymore. So many people are struggling to get by. This is why we've put forward the grocery tax proposal. But, you know, first and foremost, they need to get paid a living wage. So, like you say, I don't know what the specific demand is, but I think a living wage would probably get us a long way there. And, you know, those numbers are available, and government certainly can figure out how to do that for us.
Do you feel as though that perhaps the government is running out the clock on the school year here?
Absolutely. I think that's what they're trying to do. But this is what I'm saying is that I think that's incredibly dangerous because these workers can't subsist on strike pay for very long. And so the longer the government runs the clock, the more these workers are going to go somewhere else. They're going to go work somewhere else. And so in the end, we will not have this workforce in our schools. We're having a labor crisis everywhere, and our schools are not immune. So we don't have enough ECEs in the province. We don't have enough EPAs in the province, and part of that is evidenced by the fact that they can't even hire the scabs they're trying to hire. So if the government runs out the clock for much longer, they're going to be the big losers because not only are they're just not going to have a workforce when they come back in September because these folks aren't going to last the summer. Mm-hmm. So if they're playing a game of chicken, you have to ask, what's the end goal? Because these workers are saying very clearly in a difficult environment, we can't work for this. We can't work for what you've offered us. And so if they can't, nobody else can either. They're not going to be able to hire other people. And these people are going to be gone.
Wow.
So, so it's a terrible situation. It's really sad. And the government has got to get back to the table and fix it.
Well, until the Premier's back from his far-flung trip to Europe, he's not going to be involved in this in any way, shape, or form. Some have criticized the timing of that based on this labor negotiation, which is, and you can understand why these union members say, "What are you doing? Like, get this solved before you go to Denmark, for goodness sakes."
It's a bad look, Todd.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question it's a bad look. Yeah. But on the other hand, he doesn't need to be here for them to get back to the table. We have cell phones, we have computers, we can communicate. So yes, it's a terribly bad look. He doesn't, want to sort of stoop to deal with the problems in his own backyard. He'd rather fly to Europe and jet set over there and talk to people about things that aren't going to immediately anyway impact the lives of a lot of families in this province, and certainly in HRM. So, but this should not be a hindrance to getting back to the table. That's labor relations. That's Alan McMaster. That's Becky Drouin, the ministers of labor relations and education, and they're here. They've got capacity. Their staff are here. CUPE's here. The parties that need to be at the table could go right now.
Okay, before I run out of time, I do want to get your take on the grocery tax proposal. Sure. How much is taxed on food in the province?
So basic grocery items, and that's a federal definition, are not taxed. So that's like eggs and meat and milk and all the things you think of as the basics. But there are a lot of food items in our grocery stores that are taxed. Some of those are based on volume, so anything that's considered like a snack size. And sometimes, that is deceptive. So it might be like a box of 5 granola bars versus a box of 6 granola bars, or a single serving yogurt instead of a big yogurt, or like a small prepared bag of salad instead of a head of lettuce. So all those things are taxed, and that really adds up. And it adds, or a prepared food, right? So a prepared chicken. A rotisserie chicken. I buy those for my family. I'm not embarrassed to admit because I don't have a lot of time. Yeah. A lot of people do. And so, this really impacts families, and it impacts seniors. It impacts people who don't have transportation because often, you can't buy a whole bunch of stuff. You can't afford to buy in bulk. Many people can't afford to buy in bulk. So what we're saying is, everyone dreads going to the grocery store these days because things are just getting so expensive. I think the stats are that the average family is going to spend an extra $1,300 this year on groceries. Meanwhile, food prices are going up, so they're going to get less for that money. So what we wanted to sit down and say is, what could government do today that would make a dent in this? And that's always where we're coming from, Todd. So you and I talked about our proposal to waive pharmacare fees, which we still think the government should do. The government could do that today. People could afford their medicine. And we're saying today the government could waive the provincial portion of the tax on the food that is taxed, and it would make a difference. It wouldn't make a massive difference right away, but every grocery bill you'd pay less. And that's something that people are really begging for. I was at a family center today, and they were saying, budget for their food pantry has doubled in a year. There is so much food insecurity. There are so many people having such a hard time keeping food on the table right now that this is a really sensible thing. We have the mechanism. So right now we refund that provincial tax at point of sale for things like diapers or menstrual products. The system's there. We can do it for food, and we should. And there are other provinces that do. So BC does, Ontario does a version of it. They rebate the provincial tax under a certain amount of money, but it would help people stretch their dollar to buy food for themselves and their families, and we think that's something government should be looking at doing.
Okay. I appreciate your time, Claudia. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Claudia Chender, leader of the NDP here in Nova Scotia. Lots in the next half hour, including Sports with Cecil. We'll be back.